Let's do it. Alrighty, here we go. My name is Marty Fox from WHITEFOX. Now, here's the deal.
Welcome to another episode of With the Fox, with, of course, Marty Fox himself. And this morning, well, if you've ever been to a major event or a party and you've tasted a chicken sandwich, chances are it was made by someone from this man's company, Bruce Keebaugh of The Big Group. It's so nice to have you with us. And firstly, congratulations on an incredible career.
Thank you.
An incredible life.
Incredible life.
Well, you've got to live life well. And so that's probably the biggest learning is how do we live life well?
Do it in parties. Work in parties and events.
Do something you love doing, you know, and you do that, Marty. And I was lucky enough to sort of have a T intersection in my life that sort of took me into that world by accident.
So it started, let's go back to the start. Vic Uni.
Yep.
Went through doing hospitality.
It was actually called Footscray Tech, actually. It says in my bio, Victoria University, that it was Footscray Tech.
It was full Footscray Tech.
So let's put the bullshit aside.
So was that the dream growing up? Were you someone who, you know, you loved helping people? What was it about that path that attracted you?
Well, I always say don't get into hospitality unless you're hospitable, because there's a lot of grumpy French waiters out there, you know. So for me, I loved people. You know, I spent half of my school days on the number 69 tram and the number 8 tram going from party to party in Kooyong Road. So for me, it was sort of a natural state of evolution being at events. I wanted to be an international diplomat. I thought I'd fly around the world and solve world peace one canapé at a time, but that didn't sort of happen. So I ended up as a barista at Pellegrini's. And I really enjoyed the camaraderie and the energy that hospitality sort of has about it. It has a theatrical piece, like the doors open, the customers come in, and you need to put the show on. That said, I was the worst waiter I think Melbourne's ever seen. There's probably many people in Melbourne I dropped coffees on and lemon granitas and God only knows what else. But I left there with this sense of generosity of spirit, and so I decided to go into hotel management. So that's when I went to Footscray Tech / Victoria University, and that led me on a path of an internship that sort of gave me my T intersection of would I go left or would I go right.
And did you get into hotels or?
No, I did. Well, what happened was you had an internship, and so
where was that internship?
Well, that was the fun fact. The Grand Hyatt, which I think you'd all know on the corner of Collins and I think it's Russell Exhibition, had just opened. It was like the fanciest thing in Victoria. No one had seen anything like it. And so I got an internship there and I thought, oh, this is it, it's gold. But I'd also slipped my CV into the private home of this Melbourne caterer called Peter Rowland. He had a beautiful house here in Toorak. And so I thought I may as well just put the resume in there as well.
And was Peter Rowland the creme de la creme?
He was the absolute society of sort of Australia. If you're having a big party, you were Bond, Packer, Skase, Rowlands did the lot. So
and where did you grow up? How were you exposed to Rowland?
Oh, well, through parties, through growing up, through getting on that tram. I mean, the parties I went to didn't have catering, but they both had the scraps from the parents' stuff the night before. So I had this meeting with them and I was like, this is fun. You know, this is really interesting. And it wasn't hotel management. And in many ways, it was probably the risky move to go and work with a smaller business than an international hotelier. But it was very defining for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And just touching back on one thing there, you said, you almost offhandedly said you worked at Pellegrini's. That's one of the most iconic, the first coffee machine in Melbourne was at Pellegrini's, right? So you actually got an insight into hospitality at the grassroots level in Australia.
True hospitality.
And of course, unfortunately, the patron of him, Sisto, sadly passed away a few years ago. But in terms of, I think, hospitality in Melbourne, that is the one. So you must have seen a lot of people come through the door. You've seen how people react when, you know, someone knows their coffee order or they're coming back every single day. That's a big learning for someone in hospitality.
It's a really important thing. Like at the end of the day, that generosity of spirit, that ability to sort of forecast what someone needs before they need it.
Yeah.
Marty just did it for me before. Anyone who looks at this back will see that I'm a bit schwitzy because I've come straight from the gym, and beautiful Marty Fox gets me little paper towels from the bathroom. I mean, that's sort of what it's about.
Yes.
It's about caring for other people's needs before they even know it.
And when the people make you feel like you know exactly what they want, it makes you feel like you're at home.
Yeah.
And it's like you're the most important customer when really it's just great service making you feel that you're that comfortable you can be yourself.
It's interesting. I mean, I've read over the years lots of stuff about entertaining and how through the generations people have entertained. And we think going to restaurants is normal. But, you know, in the late 18th century, I mean, you had your big palace and, you know, carriages were sent at 12. You had dinner with your friends and then you got in the carriage and went off to someone else's massive palace and had a party. So nobody went to a restaurant. Only the workers went to a restaurant until Cesar Ritz came along and built the Ritz.
Wow. And so I love him. He's a genius. He's the man who coined the phrase, the customer is always right.
Correct. And so no one had been, if you were well-to-do, you never stayed in a hotel, let alone, because there was no bathroom, you didn't have your maid, your stuff. He all of a sudden built this incredible hotel with individual bathrooms and maids on every level, and then you got dressed as you would in your palace and went downstairs for dinner. I mean, it changed the landscape of hospitality.
The Ritz did.
Cesar Ritz, yeah.
So if I grew up in Melbourne, so if you lived in Melbourne, chances are, and I was one of them, you worked for a catering company.
Yeah.
Now, I hate to tell you this, I worked for Peter Rollins.
We all did.
Well, there you go. My wife worked for the big group. In fact, she babysat your children twice.
Everyone who worked at the big group babysat our children.
It was like a rite of passage.
Hey, I rope in all the sales coordinators.
Did you babysit Anyway, that's another story. But what I was going to say was, it was a fantastic job in your early 20s to be doing catering. And what I want to touch on, I assume it's the same with the big group, having conversations with friends who did work there. At Peter Rollins, what we were taught, to your point before about that level of service, was never let a glass get empty, always offer a canapé, do the room, the way that you serve, the way that you greet. It was really impressed on us how important that is, because
it was a system.
It's a system. It's funny, when you become, later in life, when you become the guest, I remember being like standing with a glass and looking around and my glass is being filled and I haven't even asked for it. I'm like, oh God, sorry. But you realise that's just how it's done, and it makes you feel very welcome and very, part of the service.
Super important things. And in many ways, both Rollins and the big group were sort of etiquette schools for people in this town to learn how to act and interact. So it wasn't just earning the money that you got each week as a waiter. You were actually learning really important life skills. And there's been thousands of people who've come through big group, and then the wonderful thing, I call them the sleepers, because then they go out and they get a job and they end up being the CEO of Channel 9 or something. So you need something, you go, oh, there's that waiter who used to work for, now he's 40 and he's got this fabulous job. So it's a really important part of that aspect to keep on training. As our business has grown and as we're scaling harder and harder, these systems are really important. So we've created a sort of a toolkit, which is called the Art of Australian Hospitality, which we worked with NIDA, the Dramatic Arts, to sort of bring together dramatic arts and hospitality together, so that academy and training school was just part of the nuance of Big Group.
So this is what I find so inspiring. You're about to celebrate 35 years of the Big Group, and you've just said with so much passion that you're scaling and you're doing this and you're doing that, and there's no resemblance of any form of, putting the tools down at any time soon. How do you keep that level of energy and passion and love for what it is that you're doing?
I think I've always worked in sort of 5-year blocks, and I think in business it's important snap. So
if someone says, what are you doing in 10 years? I have no idea, but I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing in 5.
Correct. And I think if you don't goal and you don't have vision forward, then you're never going to strive to get there. I mean, if the finishing line keeps moving, how does the team know where they're going? So the art of business to me is making sure everyone's in their lane, they know where they're going, and they've got a clear finish line. You have to do that for yourself as well. Otherwise you can't take the team on the journey. So yeah, I've always worked in 5 sort of year blocks, and we are at the sort of the end of a 5-year phase at the moment, which for me started in 2020.
Snap again.
Double snaps. So if we look back at March, we're in March now, aren't we? Yeah, March. If we look at March 2020, this town looked very different for all of us, and especially my industry. So to be 5 years later and have got through, one was survival, the second was sort of thrive, and then the next phase for us, 25 to 30, is scale.
Yeah.
Well, so can I just, interrupt there? And what's fascinating about 5 years ago, it was a very different landscape, and I thought that you could have very easily gone straight into the political realm, because what you did during that time was incredible, and how you spoke and how you eloquated people's feelings and what you thought should be happening. You would go on 20-minute rants in your car, on your phone, and it was inspiring, and people bought what you were saying and were on your train.
You were kind of the face. You were actually the face of hospitality and like making sure that people understood how difficult it was for this industry that everyone needs.
Well, look, there was sort of a split for me at that moment because most punters, like most normal people, think of hospitality as a bar, a restaurant, a cafe, no different than where I got my coffee this morning. But the event sector is very different. It operates differently. It's a different set of skills to bars, restaurants and cafes.
It's and the corporatised environment.
Correct. And it has a much larger economic imprint. So we're talking about $36 billion of economic impact from the business and major event sector versus the restaurant sector, which is about 22 billion. So, it's a really important part of our economy. And so for me, and when you talk to government, I didn't understand clearly until COVID came along how important the connection business must have with government in order to operate at scale. So I will never go into politics, Marty Fox, but what I will do is make sure that I'm close to whoever is in government, because we need to be their champion, not necessarily for our own gain, but this is a wide ecosystem of small business operators, from people who, do calligraphy, or a small florist, or a Red Hill cake maker, to security companies, bathroom people, dog walkers, just about. So there's this huge ecosystem of people who don't have a voice. And so that, for me, during COVID was terribly important to bring them forward and make sure they were seen. And many of them were sole operators. So it was a very, very difficult time because JobKeeper didn't apply to that industry. And now, 5 years on, and part of the reason, we'll get to it about the book, was to use the forums that we can to champion those people, because what's happened in the event ecosystem is we lost a lot of them. And when you lose entrepreneurship, when you lose talent, it's actually not good for the industry. I think competition's great. Come give us a raz. It makes us better, makes us work harder. And we have to rebuild that, because for me, brand Victoria, events capital of Australia, and for me, Australian events as we go global, is terribly important. We cannot lose that reputation. We cannot lose that imprint on the economic imprint of the events economy.
On global, what events have you done outside of Australia over the years?
Lots, Marty. For nearly 15 years, I worked in the GCC, so throughout, all the way from Saudi Arabia to Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, all through Dubai. So we spent many years there working with the most incredible agencies.
And has that been great for business back home?
We actually never talked about it back home. There's a problem in Australia, we all know it, and you'll be getting it too. Never get too big. If you're too big a poppy, an Australian...
Unless you're the big group.
No, even more so if you're the big group. I mean, we for 35 years have not really been, if you know, but if you don't, you don't. So we are not a public mass-marketed business. There's a nuance to what we do. We're dealing with very top corporate. We're dealing with very wealthy people in their private lives. So there's a discretion to the work that we do. So when we were working internationally, even more so. So, these clients are the royal families of those regions. They're the
Sultan of Brunei.
Actually, yes.
I had a feeling you might have done.
And did you yourself travel over for those particular events?
Yeah, they're very nuanced. So it's very difficult for more junior team members to understand how to deal with that culturally, but also sometimes politically. But the nuances of how you operate in that environment is very tricky. So I was finding I'd be in the region for 5 weeks, getting something ready, smashing out the event and then coming back, which I loved. We learned so much. I saw the most incredible things like you wouldn't believe.
Well, some countries don't even have alcohol. They don't even allow alcohol when you're doing a party.
Maybe not where you can see it, but sometimes I mean, as soon as we'd land, I'd call the Australian embassy, find the ambassador and say, I'm in town. Yeah. If you want to invite me over for a drink, I'm there, because the only place there was any booze was the embassy.
No names or region, but just a really memorable story from that period.
Oh, look, I mean, we're talking culturally, right? So most of the events were primarily weddings for royal women. And at that level, and remembering in that region, there's probably 25,000 royal princesses. So being a royal princess isn't, like a Tuareg princess.
Not so much cachet.
Like a Tuareg princess.
But we did this one wedding, and it was one of the first that we did. It was in Riyadh, and there was 2,500 women invited. And so we've understood that. I get the logistics of that. And I was fascinated because no men are allowed in the room. So all the women come in haute couture. These dresses are $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 each kind of thing, let alone the jewels they're wearing is probably another 4 or 5 million. And then they have the abaya, the black dress that goes over the top, and because everything when in public has to be non-revealed. But then every princess comes with a maid, every maid comes with a driver. So you're talking about 2,500 cars, 2,500 maids and 2,500 drivers, let alone the guests. So the scale was just extraordinary.
Is it in a residence?
We normally, and this would not be my part of it, was we went to do the food, the hospitality, the service, the staff, and we were with another agency who'd build the most extraordinary environments.
And what type of food do these people want? Do they want Australian food?
Well, let me say one hump or two. We learnt to cook camel. And that was pretty fascinating because they have these massive ovens, because a camel is not an easy thing to roast on a Sunday, let me tell you. So you actually need a special oven for it. So yes, we did used to do camel, but the desire from the Middle East was to have westernised. So
they got the chicken sandwich.
More so whatever was fashionable in Paris, whatever was fashionable in London.
Levant.
Correct. Whatever the latest thing in New York. I mean, they loved our Australianality, but it was more a desperation
Please tell
for
me to have
Europe.
arancini ball. You got to have an arancini.
They do like brown food, I have to say.
Would you then have local staff trained in your system, or would you take Australians overseas?
Interesting question. The most sort of desirable thing within that region is many of the staff are from the Philippines, Malaysia, etc. So, and there's a massive workforce there already. But to have Western Caucasian staff is considered very
upmarket,
elevated. Yeah, correct. So we would literally whiz out to Tullamarine, because a lot of the airlines you might know are sort of owned by those same clients, and 100 of us would get on the plane and pop over, and 13 hours later we'd be in Dubai.
You would take 100 Australian staff over?
Yep.
And would they be signing NDAs?
Yep.
And
very strict NDAs, very strict rules on everything. Then we also, too, when we couldn't get enough staff, we'd get a whole lot from Czechoslovakia, and they'd come in from Victoria's Secret and Abercrombie and Finch.
Oh, my God.
They'd come down for a couple of days and do the work.
So
and
how
off
do
we go.
you organise that? I'm fascinated with the logistics of that.
The cost and the...
Well, cost is not necessarily the hardest problem we have. More so it is access. But when you work in different cities, and it doesn't matter whether it's Buenos Aires or Paris or, Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, you can break down any city. There's a Marty Fox in every city. There's a Bruce Keebaugh in every city. Yeah. So you'll find the best florist. You'll find the best staffing person. You just have to scratch the surfaces.
Yes.
So once you do that, then you can break a city down pretty quickly.
I said this to my brother. I said, I can unlock a city in 4 days because I just proved it.
Well, you can and you can't. You might unlock it, but you might actually never get to the treasure chest. Yeah, you'll scratch the top.
Scratch it, which for me, it's like, that's why they say picking a lock.
Yeah.
Because you can unlock it just through just going like that.
Yep. So, but every city's different, but they're all the same.
Can I skip? I feel like we've skipped ahead slightly, which is awesome. But just one quick thing which we haven't actually touched on. That journey from Footscray Tech, having worked for Rollins, to then start the big group in 1990. What was the gap that you saw that you decided that was the vertical or the avenue you wanted to go down?
Were you the disruptor?
Yeah, exactly. And then how were the first few years in terms of, was Rollins making it hard for you? Was it,
Yeah, well, like everything, out of adversity comes strength, right? So this was the late 80s, early 90s. Everything had crashed. So I was whizzing around Australia in a private jet with a ham under my arm and a bag of linen in the other for the Scases or whoever having some fancy party. And then the market just blew.
And how old were you at the time?
19. So on gets the plane one day, Chikasani, and so I have a lot to thank Rollins for, not only my big group success, but my marital success, because that's how we met. And
so
we've
you
been
met
together
her on
since,
the plane?
On the plane, going up for the Scases for the
19.
Brisbane Bears at 19. Yeah.
I met Charlotte.
19,
I met Charlotte at
Did you?
19.
Yeah, well, it's good because you know what, you grow up together.
Absolutely.
It's easier.
Yeah,
it's easier. So, what was the question? I've lost my train of thought.
How did then what was that the
trajectory.
To,
yeah. So what happened was the market fell out. Rollins were like, we've got to burn people straight away. You've got to make the decisions. And so I was, I'd sort of got to a point I was doing quite a lot of more high end work, and then my job was to be the van man. I was like, I've done too much to be the van man. Here am I at 19 thinking I'm too good for that. Anyway, so I left and I went to the Carlton Football Club and pushed a trolley around the stadium for a year working for Spotless. And as shitty as that was, I learned so much about money and margin and cost protection. And if you don't know your margins, especially in hospitality, you will not survive. So I can tell you literally at the grain of rice what a margin will be.
What is the approximate margin for hospo?
I thought you could say for a grain of rice, and I was going to say, I actually don't know, not much.
Can't tell you. Brown or white?
It varies a lot, mate. It depends on, if you're in a coffee shop, it's very different to a bar or a restaurant.
Well, just for some reference, what's a coffee shop?
Oh, they'd be lucky to turn over 3 to 4%.
3 to 4%. A high-end restaurant, like?
The higher end you go, it's probably closer to 1 or 2.
Wow.
They are struggling. It's tough out
there. A pizza shop?
Pizza shop could be... Pizza shop could be good. I mean, you only have to look at Domino's and those kind of larger format, how wealthy that sector is. Correct. So there are elements of it, and you have to find the right mark. What we've kept as a very nice secret for a very long time is in the event sector, we don't have waste of product or people, because if I look at the diary on any night, we might have 13,000 or 1,200 people, whatever, being served that night. I know exactly how much labour I've got. I know exactly how much food I need to produce. Versus if I'm in a restaurant, bar or cafe, I'm waiting at the door, hoping someone will come in. So our formula is money spins quickly. We know our budgets, and so we can actually run it as a business.
Plus the client is paying upfront for versus going to a restaurant and going, I'm going to order everything on the menu.
Well, that's the really big secret. Please don't tell anyone that. But if someone's having 1,000 people for dinner, one person's paid the bill and 999 are having a great time.
Well, it's hard enough to get the measurements right with 3 kids, let alone you're putting on an event for thousands of people, knowing how many arancini balls, knowing how many...
chicken sandwiches.
So what was the break point? What was it? Sure, that normally there's you got a great client, the thing that broke the momentum.
So what that was, we sort of I started at A for advertising in the Yellow Pages and basically hit all the ad agencies. And in those days, the ad agency was the gateway to corporate Australia because they did everything creative. So if you're Shell or BP or BHP, your agency controlled all the fun. They controlled the messaging, the media, the staff Christmas party. So it was fortuitous that I did start at A for advertising in St Kilda Road, knocked on all of those doors, and everyone became our client from Badger, Clemenger, all the way to Young and Rubicon. But what they did was feed us into this network in Melbourne that then got us straight into big corporate Australia. And so we started doing gala balls and dinners, and then we ended up winning this project. And we were young. I think we were 21, 22 for the opening of Southgate down there. You wouldn't remember, but it was a massive opening. Yes. And I think there was 5,000 or 6,000 people there, and literally we were working from our mother's kitchens. So I remember the day they handed me the check, because it was like 300,000 or 400,000 in those days. It was the deposit. And they've handed me this check in the boardroom. They said, by the way, how old are you? And I've said, and I was like I am now, hairy, and I probably looked older then than I do now. And I said, I'm 21, and the whole board have just gone...
It's a lot of money to give a 21-year-old.
Were you a 21-year-old that looked 21?
No, I looked 50.
You looked
I look younger now than I did then. But they gave us an opportunity. And, when you get that opportunity, your job is to honour it.
Yeah.
You've got to honour it. You've got to bring it home. And we did. And so we still have that same belief today. Every day, whether you call it the curtain goes up or the door opens for the guests, you're on show. And you've either got to make it work or make the sale, or you don't. So it's a business a bit like real estate where you are under pressure the whole time. Never gets easier.
No. But you also have you've now imprinted yourself on major events. So Flemington Carnival, you're always there, things like the Grand Prix or the Australian Open. Like we have a lot of major events here, big groups there.
Yep.
So when did that start and how was that?
That started pretty much from the inception of the business because it was this triangle, right? So it was the at home in Toorak for, ladies for Mahjong lunch for 6 or Betsy's 21st. And then once the trust comes to do the wedding, in the office, it was the boardroom lunch, it was the annual staff meeting, it was the AGM. And then in the major events sector, it started as a little car park in the back of the boot at Flemington to the stuff that you see now that we build 3-story pavilions. Yeah, correct.
I love the range that you've got this highly intimate setting, the biggest day of your life being the wedding, and then the biggest day on the calendar for the corporates. Like you're touching the same people, but in 3 different food mediums, which is, you would look at it not even as work.
No.
Because it's You're literally living through your business.
Well, we become sort of a constant in people's lives because we're there for the funeral, we're there for the birth, we're there for the wedding, but then we're also at the office solving the problem, and we're also there. So we're a sort of a continuum. So the network becomes very interesting because when there is a downturn, you look at the sectors that you're in, and we're in every sector by accident. So that's been a really interesting for the business.
When did you? What about bricks and mortar? Because you've got a few venues. You took over the Belgian Beer Cafe. It's now the Ormond. It's a beautiful. That's one of the best venues in terms of just look and feel in Victoria.
Which we're there tomorrow night.
Oh yeah, that's where the party is.
Yeah, but I mean, so when was the decision? Okay, let's also get some event space. It makes sense if you're doing events, having a space that you can run your events. Yeah.
What was important was we were doing so much sort of temporary work, building it, pulling it down, building it, pulling it down, and it's not sustainable. It's been fun, and very much what you see in the book is a lot of that beauty, but it's 24 hours and then it's gone. What I knew we needed was revenues that were spinning the whole time, and the most important thing is that asset, revenue generation. So to me, optimizing a venue 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch and dinner. So you've got to be in corporate, you've got to be in private, and then you've got to fill those Sundays as well. So, God love a bar mitzvah, it gets fills in that Sunday. So I love it.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, exactly. So we did move into venues. It's a really important part to have those products for our clients, both privately and corporate.
And where are those venues?
They're all over the place. We've just opened in Sydney. We took over the MCA on Circular Quay there. There's 5 venues in there. One does 1,000. There's a couple on the roof. We've built restaurants, cafes. And then we just opened in Sydney last week Illumina, which is a large corporate meeting business event space. Big. That's 1,000 packs, which is good. And then in Melbourne, Ormond Collective, Luminaire, Glasshouse. So those assets are important.
As a seller, I'm a celebrant outside of this work. I do a lot of weddings, and I've done weddings at Luminaire and Ormond Collective and stuff. And you do notice when you go to events, when you get served the sort of ceremony food, you're like, oh, here we go. The food is beautiful. Your food is exceptionally. It's known that way. It's like, it's big group food. It's going to be good. I think that's just a huge tick, because there's times when you sit down at events and you get served the chicken or the fish or the beef or the fish or whatever it is, and you're like, here we go. But that makes a difference too. When you're serving food en masse, it is very hard to cook a steak well. Right? To make sure that eye fillet is tender. So that's something I'm sure you guys pay a lot of attention to in your team.
We do, and market perceptions changed a lot, right? People expect a restaurant experience within a catered environment. So they sort of forget that there's 600 people and you're hanging off a cliff and you're in a barn down in Bairnsdale or something. Yeah. So, bringing in the facilities and understanding how to create those environments in nuance of space is very important. And we often take celebrity chefs out of their fabulous commercial kitchen and take them to our environments. They're like, oh my God, this catering world is tough. So it's very different. But the food is the cornerstone of where we started. It is still the reason why people call to bring us in. In the pie chart of revenue, it is smaller than all the others because the business changed over the last 10 to 15 years, and the environment in which you're eating is just as important as what's on the plate.
But you're also rated on the food.
Yes.
You don't make the drinks. You can serve a Peroni anywhere in the world and it tastes like a Peroni, but your food is your food, right? So people and the experience of the waiter.
Talk to me about that pie chart. You said that the food's a small slither. What else is in that pie chart?
Well, when you look at an event and you sort of pull it apart, food's part of it, booze part of it, the people is part of it, the build is part of it. It can be very hard. That experience, that entertainment, how you're eating with your eyes, flowers, all of those other things become a component. And to your point earlier, when we started Big Group in those early 90s, there was sort of a caterer over here and then there was a design team over there and there's someone else here. We put it together as a hospitality agency. So we became somewhere where you could call and we'd have a one-stop appeal. And what that did was it meant when we were working with, say, a luxury brand or even a corporate brand whose vision and values you understand, we can design that event for exactly that right demographic. When you get to personal brands, private work, it's a bit trickier because often people don't know their own personal brand. But that was our secret sauce. So now as we work in New South Wales, it's a very different market. Everything's in silos. So we believe a one-stop shop is an easy way to go.
What do you say is the big differences between the Sydney market and the Melbourne market?
It's very simple, Marty Fox. It's geography.
That's it.
Everyone always says, what's that mean? I say, well, Melbourne was a planned city. If you're sort of well-to-do in Melbourne, you've got an acre block up here, you've got a couple of tennis courts and 500 pools and a mansion. So when you have a party, and in the 70s, 80s and 90s, Peter Rowland, Kevin O'Neill and Harry the Hirer came in and put that party together. And so that created a really big ecosystem, and that's the way you entertain. If you're in Sydney, you're in a place off the harbour, it costs 70 million. Someone's looking at you from one side and you're looking up, but you've got no space. So you entertain in a restaurant. So it's very different. The other aspect of it, which is really important, is, in those Kennett days when we built the tennis centre and we won F1 for this state and Flemington, there's nowhere in the world that you can stay in a CBD hotel and walk to an open or catch a tram to F1.
Well, there's 4 opens in the world, right?
Yeah,
And one of them's here.
It's extraordinary. So we have an asset that is so important in Victoria, and our major events are vital. So
our biggest asset's the culture.
Our biggest asset is the infrastructure, I think, Marty, because the ability to have that infrastructure is monumental. I mean, everyone's going on about the Brisbane Olympic Games at the moment.
I think we're going to win most of the events.
They have to come to
It'll become
Victoria.
the Australian Olympics.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what I'm banging on about at the moment. A state shouldn't be taking the Olympics. It's Australia putting on the Olympics. We should aggregate those funds and present and put Australia on show at that time, housed at Brisbane, but shown around Australia.
I think the athletics will be at the G. Like, you tell me it's not going to be at the G.
Well, they're trying to rebuild the Gabba for it, but we'll see.
It's
In
just
7 years?
Yeah, I know.
no. I mean, I've been waiting for this tram line to go past from Burleigh to the airport.
Up in the Gold Coast.
I keep going past and they're ready meat pies.
Yeah.
You go to Dubai and you watch the workers. They're working.
It's done in weeks.
Well,
Half
Literally.
of them die.
a worker in Dubai is not getting $240,000 to spin a thing, but that's a whole nother podcast.
That's another podcast. So, okay, let's get to some Marty loves some juicy stuff. What's some of the most outrageous things you've been asked to do at a party, like get an elephant or, have Katy Perry sing? What are some
Well,
of
it
those?
comes
Well,
back to the
that's boring
clientele.
because we've done both of those things.
Yeah.
An elephant? Tell us about the elephant.
Oh, look, elephants are fun. Well, we had this wonderful client years ago, and I think it was the groom's sister or the groom's brother, I can't remember, and they thought it'd be fun that the bride and groom should leave on an elephant. So they rang and said, can we get an elephant? I said, oh, sure. I just say yes to everything. Worry about the problem later.
Okay.
So what do? We call the circus. And in those days, you probably can't get an elephant. Now it's probably very unwoke. But so I just said, let's get an elephant. Boom, it was all booked. Anyway, I'm on comms. The bride's about to go. I said, bring down the elephant. And the girl says to me on the other end, not elephants, Bruce. Not elephant, elephants. And I said, what the? I said, she said, there's 7 elephants here. You've got to have the whole family.
Oh, my God.
So the whole family's coming down like the Jungle Book with their little tails and noses hooked together. And I'm like, I only fucking want one. Get rid of the other 6. And she said, if you get rid of them, they're going to back up. So off they went with 6 elephants.
But elephant shit's not small.
Oh, no, it's not good. Oh, and the fur, the hair on an elephant is like literally like needles. Yeah, that bride was not so comfortable.
Tell me about something that I saw on social media, the celebration of your 50th overseas.
Oh, yeah, that was fun. Well, I genuinely believe that you've got to celebrate big moments in life because, and honest to God, and I'll say it on this podcast right now, if I die tomorrow and I go out there, I've had and got run over by a car or something, I've had the best life. Every day I've had fun and seen things. For my 40th, Marty, I had 1,000 people for sit-down dinner, which was, God, bloody terrible. I hated it and I had no fun. So for my 50th, I really wanted a much more curated group. And so I had 80 and we sort of flipped around the Amalfi Coast and Capri.
So I see Nick Rutherford spinning the...
Nick came over and spun some...
He did that wedding.
Yeah.
And also another thing that I'd like to know is you've got, and you promote, your children, your wife, you've got a great tight-knit family and you work hard, you play hard and you have a lot of fun. People ask me all the time, growing a business, spending time with your wife, integrating your kids. How's it worked for you for 35 years, integrating all of it and being in love with the moments?
Yeah. Well, there's sort of been a natural thing, a bit like what you were saying before with your wife. We've grown up together, right? We've fought every battle together. We still, every night, go to bed and go, okay, what about this? What about that? So we've shared everything. So that's been super important. Probably the thing that both Cheeks and I are the proudest of is that our kids have grown up to be resilient, independent, and very much their own people. And, there's that sort of hangover that everyone says, oh, your children should go into the family business. And I'm like, no. You in life must do what you are passionate about and you've got to get into your own lane. And I feel very proud that they've both done that independently. And in the end of the day, that's your greatest success. And I feel very proud of our relationship and the kids. More so than the business.
They're the 3 pillars. It's, your relationship with your wife. It's, a lot of people say, oh, do you put the kids first? Well, no, actually,
Never.
you put your relationship first because it's the relationship that holds it all together.
Yeah.
and the kids and the business. It's
We've always done the same thing. I've always said there's a triangle and at the top is us. And if we muck that up, then everything else gets mucked up. And number 2, we always said was the kids, but sometimes they were number 3. Sometimes the business was number 1. But the order was always supposed to be us.
Yeah.
If we don't get that right,
the
we've got
majority of
nothing
the
to give
time
the
it's
kids.
you guys.
Correct. And then the business.
Yeah.
Can we touch on briefly, because he's been through it now in the last couple of years, and you have a little bit too, the experience of reality television.
Mhm.
What was it like for you? Obviously, Chica being front and center, but you were obviously part of it.
Yeah.
Was it invasive? Did you enjoy it? What was it like for you?
Look, I think it was a really great thing for Cheeks at that time. She was in her mid-40s and she was going through a change of where she wanted to go and what she was doing. She hadn't been as involved in the big group business. Her passions really are the things that she's amazing at, and that is interiors, lifestyle, design, home. That's where Cheeks, and that's what created Big Group in the beginning, was her beautiful eye and her style. So when that opportunity came on, she was sort of like, well, why didn't I give this a go? So she did, and she loved it. She had a really good time. In the beginning, we went into that as, here's a great way to showcase our business. Here's a great way to build revenue and sales. Now, it didn't actually transpire like that necessarily into sales, but from a brand point of view, it gave us national awareness, right? So it was really good. What it did for Cheeks personally was it allowed her to create a personal brand. So that once she could nationalise that, from her books, that led her to the commercial contracts that she now has with Harris Scarf and Blue Illusion. So she's been able to monetize that original brand from that show and also have a successful career that she's having a really great time at. So it's important, I think, to use those mechanisms well. The problem is some of them, I was watching MAFS last night, I'm embarrassed to say, sometimes the format goes on for so long that the characters inside know the next steps and stages. So it takes some authenticity out of...
Well, it's got to be a bit curated. I mean, Marty's experience on the block is different because it has to be non-curated, otherwise it makes no sense. He's got to walk into a room and have
people
no
think
experience,
it's planned,
right?
but my position on the block is very unplanned because you actually do walk in with fresh eyes. Everyone thinks, oh, you know what's going on. No, you don't.
It actually makes for better television. It's the same as your team sent me the questions for today. I didn't look at them because for me, I find it more natural just to tell my story with you guys. Same as when you go on and they've done some hideous room or some brilliant room on the show. Your reaction's important.
We think so similar because whenever there's questions, he's always saying, do you want to say anything? I said, no, I don't want to say anything.
Yeah, I prefer not.
Like,
It's the same as
not, because
CVs.
you know what? We trust ourselves off cuff.
Yeah, and I say to when someone sends their CV, I want to read it. You tell me your story and you show me why I should employ you. It's much easier.
Yeah, because they can write whatever they want on the CV.
Who's got the time to read all those things?
But people can write whatever they want on the CV. I can smell shit a mile away.
Yeah, correct. And you're either a salesperson or you're not a salesperson, and we'll see it very quickly.
So you said before, if you step outside, and I hope it doesn't happen, you get hit by a car, it'll be okay. But so what are the moments in this last 35 years of the Big Group, and I'm sure there's plenty, what are the moments that sit at the top for you? What are the upper echelon, the ones you hang your hat on?
South Bank being the big one, or South?
I'm not very good at that. That's an interesting question. So the DNA of where we come from, who we are, all that stuff. I mean, I'm a little old Catholic. So, to say, oh, gee, did a great job. I've got to get the Salice out in the morning and beat myself up. So I don't look at it that. Unfortunately, I'm not good at looking back.
Right.
I like looking forward.
Okay.
So that's why the book was a very emotional thing for me to do, to try to compile all these memories into one sort of space. So, yeah, I can't hang my hat.
I want to ask you a question.
Well,
Okay.
This book is,
That's-
can I
it's
say, it's like a
bloody heavy.
bicep curl. It's how heavy is it?
it's
5 kilos? It's,
they're shipping some to London. We've got a launch in London next week after next. I'm like, stop.
If you're watching the podcast, this is the book. And by the way, unbelievable coffee table book.
Oh,
Look at the
it's
size
going
of
in
it.
my front lounge room.
That's
Hopefully
for-
that's
that's
But we
for
did
mine.
that
coming
for the
back to
real
you.
estate sector because
Look at that.
the cover was going to be red, and everyone's like, nobody puts a red coffee table book on. So I said, do it black and white.
It's unbelievable. You wanted to ask about this?
No, I want to know, you said that you work in 5-year blocks. Where are you 5 years from today?
I have scaled the business further. I'd like to move into
Where
the business. We'll go further in New South Wales, more venues, primarily not private so much. It'll be more venues, major eventing. Brisbane for us is a right market.
Do you own the freehold or do you create the businesses?
No, it's very difficult for us to own freehold in those large-scale venues because the physical assets would be
They're
40, 50,
institutionally
60.
owned.
Correct. So we will build out a contracts business. We think Brisbane is a really interesting market. We also think there's some space in Adelaide. So that's probably the plan. We've both got aging parents at the moment. So that is something that's keeping us sort of bound more to Australia. But our dream would be to, live in Italy 6 months and be here 6 months.
I love that.
What a great little plan that is.
Yeah.
Like a little plan. No, it's a big plan.
You know what? You need problems in your life. Everyone says, why would you want to buy a house in Tuscany? We've read the books. It's all terrible. I'm like, well, I want problems. My whole career has been about problems and solutions. Do you think I'm going to stop now?
Well, if you solve those problems, you get paid.
Correct. Or if I grow something or a goat, eats up the whole lawn at my Tuscan villa, I'll have to bloody get the lawnmower out, won't I?
Now, this is the big question. You may be giving away the 11 secret herbs and spices, so apologies if you have to do that. If you work in catering or you've been to a catered event, the chicken sandwiches are the king, right? And I worked at Rollins, so
Yep.
the chicken sandwiches.
Totally.
So the big group chicken sandwich, how many incarnations was it perfected?
Look.
Is it about the mayonnaise? Is it about the dill or the tarragon or whatever?
Do you know,
is it?
I've called myself a sandwich man for a really long time, and it's a great line, especially when you're traveling. If you go, what do you do? And say, I make sandwiches. And you end up having an interesting conversation with people. I didn't invent the chicken sandwich.
No.
Peter Rowland probably didn't even invent
No,
the
of
chicken
course not.
sandwich. But it's so sort of contrite with our business, so there's nothing to it.
No, it's mayonnaise, it's chicken,
Mayonnaise,
it's
chicken, tarragon, some herbs, shove it all in. The key to it is actually how you prepare it, and you need to wrap them up. Each sandwich, this is actually the dead truth, you got to have a lot of chucks with a lot of water on it.
Yeah.
You've got to wrap each one up with like two little babies, and you never cut two on top of each other. Like I see people cutting like 10. It's like, no, everything has to be fluffy. So there is a whole ordinance of what goes on.
No, but sorry, just on that, because you talked before about the big name chefs coming to your kitchens and saying, whoa, but literally, and I remember at Roland's, there's an off-site kitchen. A lot of this stuff is pre-cooked or at least half-cooked and then prepared and taken on site. There is an art to being able to prepare something half and still have it fresh when the person picks it off the plate, right?
That's the art of catering.
It's the science behind it,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, there is. It's a logistics business, right? So if you're not good, and we've got a lot of OCD people who work with it, so I love them because they've got everything in order, they've got everything in lines. If you're not planned, the roots of your event are not strong, the tree will fall over.
When do you ever go to events that you don't do and say, oh, this is, and see something and go, that's amazing. Oh, I love how they did that. Do you still pick up on those little things when you're at things?
Look, I used to on social media see the most amazing things around the world. I think the medium's changing, so we're not seeing as much stuff. And that was one of the reasons I did the book as well. We stopped putting our creativity out there because it was just being sort of raped and pillaged and taken away. So we wanted to put it into a format. There are amazing people doing things all around the world, and it's exciting.
Well, I'm really excited to help celebrate with a lot of your network, close friends, customers, people that have admired what you've done over the last 35 years tomorrow.
Yes.
And what can we expect?
Oh, look, tomorrow is going to be, it should be fun. It'll be crazy because, going back to where it all sort of started, it's such a hybrid of Melbourne society, corporate, the major events industry, government, philanthropy. So it'll be licorice all sorts of guests, which I love. And what I feel very proud of, there's generational guests coming there. So the grandparents, the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren, all that series are my client. So that's something to maintain those networks and relationships. That's what I feel proud of.
Can you tell us what it was like, just to finish off here, might sound like a silly question, but I just love it, growing up as a Bruce in Australia? Because Bruce, the name Bruce...
Who calls a baby Bruce?
You don't hear of baby Bruce anymore. But in
Barbara.
Australia, it's such an Australian name in the 70s
I keep
and
hoping
80s.
it's making a comeback. Like I see ads on the TV.
Bruce.
It's like, Bruce, get over here. It's such a shit name.
Reminds me of Can Bruce has gone mad? Can Bruce has gone mad? Can Bruce has gone mad?
But
It is tragic.
but in the 80s, like the names like Kevin and Bruce.
Oh, and now you call your
Greg
kid
and-
Wolf or,
Yeah,
Tarragon.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, no
What
one...
was Bruce like being a Bruce?
I got teased. I got
Did
teased
you?
all the time. And that makes you resilient,
Of
right?
course.
Because that makes you sharp. Either you punch someone in the face, which I'm actually now quite good at, or you become sharp-witted.
Yeah.
And so for me, I used sharp wit to get through
But
that.
it also it's your moniker. It's like people know Bruce Keebaugh. Like
Yeah.
it's right there. So it's your thing.
So
But
someone call a baby Bruce. Can't you have another one? You'd call baby after
Imagine
me,
that.
wouldn't you?
If a fourth comes
Fourth.
and it's a boy,
Four. You don't want four.
Olive body
it's
and
Bruce.
No.
Bruce Fox.
I'm not having Bruce going to Tarago, so let's not have a fourth
No, it'll
child.
be a care carnival.
Bruce has to be in a Porsche.
So good.
It's so good to have you. I feel like we need another one where we can just talk just stories about the parties you've done. You've got some incredible experiences, but honestly, iconic Australian business. Congratulations on everything you've
Thank
achieved.
you.
We love having you on here, and good luck with the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, Bruce.
We'll keep on making those sandwiches. Thanks, boys. It was fun to
See you
chat.
tomorrow night.
We'll do.
Thank you.
Done.
That was amazing.
Easy.
Thanks, Bruce.